You are listening to Changes Big and Small. This is Demian, your host, as we explore what makes change exhilarating. Each episode, we'll meet one person who's found freedom by embracing change. I hope you'll listen to the whole episode between me and Laetitia today. We spend the bulk of the time discussing macrobiotics and how it's transformed her life. We also explore the concepts of balance and spontaneity and how they play out in her day-to-day. Let's get started. So tell us, where were you born, where do you live, and what do you do that pays the bills?
I was born in France, near Paris, and I've been living in Portugal since I was 3 years old, so this is the country I consider home. And now I work for Automattic.
Listeners might not actually know what Automattic is, even though you were the second person that I've interviewed who works here. Can you tell us what do you do?
I'm a happiness engineer, so I provide tech support. We have support via chat, via email, and that's mostly what I do. So most of my time is spent in chat, supporting our users. I also answer emails. And then I spend some time also troubleshooting tricky issues that come by in very specific sites.
Laetitia has been very modest because she's a great troubleshooter and has been working very hard on some of our most advanced offerings.
Thank you.
What are you most excited about right now?
Well, right now at this very moment, I'm very excited because I'm leaving in a long trip to India in a week. That's pretty exciting and scary all at the same time.
That is exciting. Where will you go first?
Actually, we're going to have a home base in India, which we haven't found yet, but we will. So we're going to rent a place for 4 months so that I have the stability to work. And we're going to be based in Goa. And then we're going to travel from Goa to visit the north, the south, and every other place we want to go, but we will have a base.
You're going to be working while you're traveling.
Yes.
How did this trip come about? 4 months sounds like a long time to go on a trip to India.
I really love traveling, and it's been a while since I haven't traveled, and my boyfriend never left Europe, and India is a place that I love and he really wants to get to know. But it's such a huge country that it makes it really hard to see in a couple of weeks. And we started thinking about going for a month. And then we said, well, if we go for a month, why don't we stay 2? And then we started increasing. And at the end, it was like, okay, so let's just spend the whole winter because it's really cold in Portugal. So let's just spend the winter there and we'll come back for spring. And that was it.
What did you have to do to prepare for such a big trip?
A lot of things. So there are always new questions coming into my mind. So besides all the flight planning and planning small holidays for travel, there's the whole internet issue. Well, not an issue, but the necessity that we have to be connected to work. And that's a huge one because, well, it's not like in Europe where you have roaming and you're connected. In India, it's not the same and the connection is not as reliable. So that planning was and still is a big part of it. And then there's a lot of planning so we can decide the places where we want to go because even though it's 4 months, it's 4 months working. So it's not 4 full months backpacking. In each place I want to go or we want to go, we do need a stable connection. So there's a lot of things involved there. And then there's also vaccines, passports, visas, all that.
How long have you been planning this trip?
The idea is here for almost a year now, but it's been postponed. We were supposed to have done this before, but it's been postponed. But the actual planning started like 3 months ago, maybe.
You said before that you enjoy traveling and you're planning this big trip. That sounds like a really big change. Are you somebody who likes to make a lot of changes in your life?
Definitely, I am. I love change and I cannot live without it. If I stay too long in the same place or having the same kind of habits, I get bored and I look for something different. I've had a lot of changes in my life, and this is one that although it's scary and exciting at the same time, it's not a huge change. It's going to be 4 months in a different place with a different time zone, but it's 4 months. It goes by very fast. And in 4 months, I'm back, and I'm back to my home and my country. So it's not that big. The most scary thing is probably the work part, because it's the first time that I'm going to do a leisure trip and work at the same time.
Besides weekends, do you have some time off during this trip?
Yes, I've planned a short trip to Sri Lanka, and I plan to take a week or a couple of weeks to go up to Nepal and the whole north of India.
Wow, that's very exciting. When I lived in India 16 years ago, or something like that now, we did plan a trip to North India because we wanted to see the Indian Himalayas. And we rented a car and took a very windy road up to Almora. But one of my friends had terrible motion sickness. And when we got there, there was a strike. And actually, none of the STD booths, they were called, which are basically public telephone booths, um, none of them worked because of the strike. So we could not call and confirm our reservation or plan the next part of our trip. And that combined with the motion sickness, we ended up giving up and we went back down to Lucknow, spent the night in a hotel and watched, I think So You Think You Can Dance or some other show like that, just because my friend was feeling so terrible from the trip and we just needed some downtime.
That's India right there for you.
So you mentioned you've made a lot of changes. What are some of the other changes that you've made?
So the first one, and it's probably one of the biggest ones, was when I went to Erasmus in Barcelona. I was supposed to go with a friend, and at the last minute he cancelled, so I went alone, and I was 19. It was the first time I traveled alone. It was the first time I left the country alone. And I remember vividly landing in Barcelona and having my backpack and looking at the city and thinking, wow, I'm going to live here for a whole year. And I don't even know how to speak the language. And that was the first hint I got of how much I love change and love to know new stuff and love to be out of my comfort zone. Not going to say it was easy, but it was definitely one of the best experiences of my life.
You said that this is one of the biggest changes. If you had to pick the biggest change that you've made in your life, what would you say it is?
Until now, I would say that the biggest change was when I decided to enroll in the macrobiotics course. Let me give a short explanation. So macrobiotics is a Japanese way of life / philosophy. It actually says that your healthy or your health level is defined by how you adapt to changes. So how you adapt to environmental changes, to weather, to food, to new countries, to people around you. So if you can adapt easily, and if your body and your mind doesn't suffer from those changes, then you're considered healthy. And of course, there's a whole thing behind this, but that was likely one of the biggest changes I made because it changed everything in my life and eventually led to living in the country, so not living in the city anymore, and it led to a different foods, different, way of life. And the job I have now, it was definitely a consequence of that change.
What attracted you to macrobiotics? So how did you decide to study that way of life?
When I was living in Turkey, I was very tired. I was working a lot. I lived there for 2 years and I was working like 12 to 16 hours a day. I was very tired. And at some point I decided I cannot do this anymore. So I told my boss, look, I'm going to take 2 weeks holidays, whether you like it or not. I really need them. And I booked a trip to India. And when I was in India, I loved it so much that the guide that I was in, he told me, look, we're going to go to Morocco in 2 months. Do you want to come? I was like, yeah, I want to come. So I talked with my company at the time and told them, I really want to do this. It's only 1 week. I've been working nonstop for a lot of time. So can I go? And they're like, sure. So one of the people, or one of the travelers with me in the Morocco trip, was one of the owners of the Macrobiotics Institute in Lisbon. She's an awesome person. She's 60 plus years old now. She has 5 kids, if I'm not mistaken, and they all look very healthy. They all follow the macrobiotics way of life. And most people of that trip actually were from the Institute and follow that. And it was such a different energy. And it's not something that I can actually put into words, but as soon as the trip ended, I was like, I want to do this, and I want to study, and I want to learn, because this seems awesome. And it is.
My experience with macrobiotics were actually only in Japan. I lived in Nagoya, and there were several macrobiotic restaurants in the area, and I went to a few of them. I didn't actually learn a lot about macrobiotics, except that macrobiotics equals healthy. And I think I remember there being kind of a focus on fermentation and a lot of plants. Is the macrobiotic diet always vegetarian?
No, not at all. The thing is, it doesn't forbid anything. It says that each person should eat what's best for them. So what you eat or what's best for you, it's not necessarily best for me. Now, in general, vegetables are more used, vegetables and cereals. But if you're living near the sea, you can definitely eat fish, because that's what Mother Nature has there for you. I could speak for an hour on this.
Okay, that's interesting. I think it must have just been the restaurants I went to. Also, I eat mostly vegetarian anyway, so it could have been that it was also my bias to find those kinds of places, and somehow I connected it to.
No, definitely meat is not advised frequently. Unless you have a very specific condition, you should avoid it most of the time. But it's not forbidden. You can have it if you feel like it will give you what you need at that time. It's mostly an energy thing.
You made a lot of changes because of deciding to study and live in a macrobiotic way. What challenges did you have along the way?
Well, when you start changes, at least me, I try to start small and build on that. But when you do something, or when you find something that swipes you off your feet, like this one, it's really hard to start small, and people around you start noticing. And I don't really like to, for instance, talk about macrobiotics or talk about vegetarianism. Even though it's what I do, I don't think everyone has to do it just because that was my choice. But people start noticing. Keeping with social interactions was a challenge, because it's hard to schedule a dinner with the same group of friends if you're not eating anything that restaurant has to offer. And I don't want to make everyone eat, for instance, vegetarian, because I am one. And then there are a lot of emotional challenges on the way, because at least in the beginning, you have to be very strict, and discipline is very important. And if you've been in Japan, you know that discipline is a very important thing there. And it does require discipline all along the way. That was not something I was used to, because I'm very easygoing, go with the flow. I don't really like tight schedules or planning stuff or planning meals. And there was a lot of that involved in my life.
Has the way that you practiced or the way that you live with macrobiotics, has it changed over time from when you started to now?
Yeah, it changed a lot. Well, I am still a macrobiotics in the sense that I eat mostly what the earth gives. So now we have our own garden, and we grow our own food mostly. So the vegetables we eat, the fruit we get, mostly comes from our garden. And in that sense, I'm 100% macrobiotic. But I left the strictness aside. I'm much more flexible with what I eat and where I eat it. I think this happens with all disciplines. You're convinced that the change that you made, it's the right one. It's not always easy to be flexible when you make a choice and you're 100% convinced that that's the right one. And then once you learn and grow, you understand and accept that your choice is your own, and you can be flexible, and that doesn't make you less of a vegetarian or macrobiotic or whatever choice we're talking about. So yeah, I'm not half as strict as I was in the beginning.
Yeah, I think that's a common journey, probably. Like you start and you want to do all the things and you want to do everything perfectly. And then you realize that you're a full human being with life and expectations. And sometimes there are compromises based on who you're with or what the event is.
And you're not an hermit, so you don't live alone and you have friends and you have to be flexible. And I think that's part of the challenge of everything.
What experiences along the way have taught you how to be so flexible or how to adapt in different situations?
A lot of it comes from culture. Here in Portugal, we're very relaxed. So we really like good quality of life. So we like going out for dinner and having drinks. And we get like an hour late to any appointments we make. And that it's a very Latin thing. And I think that helps a lot because if you grow this way and if you're used to this, well, obviously it has a repercussion in the rest of your life. But then I had very strict rules growing up. When I was able to leave my parents' place, well, when I went to Erasmus, I went the whole opposite way. So I was like, okay, so I'm my own decider. At this moment, I will have no schedules. I will have nothing. I do what I want when I want. And it was like that for a long time. And then at some point, I found a balance. So I do not like the very strict rules way of life, but I do understand that it's important to plan, it's important to schedule, it's important to have a general idea of how things would go, and at the same time leave space for whatever comes up that we're not expecting or whatever we want to do. So now I really need to have time for the unexpected or to do whatever I please.
It sounds like you really like to be spontaneous, but you found that you can't always be spontaneous, right? And so you're trying to find when can you be spontaneous and when do you have to schedule things or plan things ahead of time?
I was thinking about this and I've been thinking a lot about this. I think it's a balance. Like everything in life, it has to be a balance. So I really like having time and space to be spontaneous and to have everyone around me being spontaneous. And I think that's very important. And that's where a lot of the learning and the growing come from. But once you learn things like yoga or once you study, when you do course or anything, you know that you need to plan and you need to have schedules. And I'm a very big fan of habits, of routines. I think they're important. And I think that only when you're able to actually master your time, and I say master with little quotes in that, but when you're able to be the owner of your time and when you're able to discipline yourself in a certain way, then that's when you can actually be free.
When I lived in Japan, I took an ikebana class. And so ikebana is Japanese flower arrangement. And I think I took maybe about 6 classes. I enjoyed it. I liked to create a design that I found to be pretty or beautiful. But I remember the last class I did, and I didn't want to go back to ikebana after this. I made my design and the teacher came over and she said it was all wrong, that I hadn't followed any of the rules of ikebana. Now, there are many different types of ikebana and there are many different approaches to ikebana, but this one was a very traditional style. And so she took all my flowers out of the kenzan. You use a special thing. I'm being so technical. It basically is a spiky thing that you can use to put the flowers into it. So she took all the flowers out of it and then she rearranged them in the way that was right. And I remember feeling so discouraged and so upset. I smiled through it because that's what you're supposed to do. But I was like, okay, that's it. I'm done with this teacher. And
Yeah.
I didn't go back. So I definitely understand what you mean about finding what's true to yourself or finding what's right for you.
Yeah.
You've mentioned balance several times. What does it mean to you to be balanced? What does that look like to you in your life?
I think balance is what allows this adaptability to everything, to people around us, to changes. I don't really know how to explain it, but being balanced is having time for everything, is having time for myself, having time for work, is having time to do nothing and having time to learn new stuff, is having tight schedules sometimes, or at the end of the day, go to the beach and do nothing. It's a lot about variety. Although you can be balanced with just sticking in the middle, you know? Like if you think of a hurricane and you're like there in the middle and everything is spinning around you, but the center of the hurricane is completely still, you can also have that balance. But the idea of getting a bit of everything, like getting a bit of every kinds of food, getting a bit of different types of weather, getting a bit of different kinds of people and different situations, that's for me where balance comes from.
Do you feel that you need to have this variety or this combination of things for balance in your life every day? Or is it over the course of a week or of a month?
So I have some things I have to do every day, like work, not every day, but most days. And that is very important. And then I like to have like weekly social gatherings because I need to talk with people and listen to people and everything. But everything else, it depends a lot on how I feel. If I feel I want to go to the beach every day for a week, I will. If I feel I don't need it, I won't. I don't have really strict rules about it.
For example, you mentioned you could spend 1 week going to the beach every day and then the next week not going there. So your concept of balance isn't that everything needs to have the same priority. It sounds like at different times, different things can have different priorities.
Yes, that is right. And that's exactly where adaptability comes from. So, for instance, going back to the macrobiotics course, and I really didn't want to make this all about macrobiotics, but it is a big part of me. So, the first year is all about getting to know yourself, getting to understand what you need at a certain time. If you're getting sick, why you're getting sick, where is it coming from, and what do you need right there and then to balance things, because you're healthy when you're balanced. And this self-awareness lets you understand if I'm getting bored or if I'm getting itchy because I need to see the sea, or because I need to go and have a beer with people and talk, or if I need to go to the mountains, or if I need to go to Lisbon to see a city and the whole life and the cultural thing. It's very much unplanned. Then there are things I do plan, like this trip. I've been feeling that I need it, that I need to go to a different place, a different culture. And it's not something I need tomorrow, but it's something that I'll need eventually. So I start planning on it. But yeah, it's not a hard rule, and it's not everything gets its own percentage of time. It's more a rule of thumb. Let's see what I'm missing and what I feel like I should be doing now.
What do you struggle with or what scares you?
And different questions, but let's start.
Okay.
I struggle a lot with this balance, to be honest. I love it and I strive for it, but I struggle a lot with the thing of I know I like to plan things and I know I need to plan things, and that's my safe place. When everything is wrong, I go in and start planning stuff because that's like a safety net for me. And the spontaneous thing, because, well, you know me, I'm not a very extroverted person, so it's not always easy to get out there and start doing things. Even when I feel I need them, it's not always easy to go out and do them. So there's that. And that's a huge struggle. And then, I don't know, everything else are challenges. Like I was never able to look into the future and see, I'm going to be this person in 3 years, or I'm going to do this, or I'm going to live here, or I'm going to work here. I've never been able to do it, and I still am not able to do it. And that's pretty scary because there is no real commitment anywhere. Like, I cannot buy a house, I will not buy a land, I will not commit to a nomad lifestyle, I will not take any big decisions because I have no idea what I'm going to need or want in the future. And that's not always easy.
What makes it hard?
I don't know, when you're in your 20s, it's okay. People expect you to not know stuff and to not decide stuff. Once you move forward in life, people start expecting things. And I'm very good at not doing what people expect. But still, at some point, you gotta wonder, come on, everyone's expecting something.
It sounds like a bit of social pressure, maybe.
Not so much social, but yeah, I don't want to say I don't care. Of course I care. Everyone kind of cares in some measure, but it's not like for what other people think. It's like, if everyone is thinking this, shouldn't I? Shouldn't I be kind of focusing on this instead of not focusing and choosing not to think of it? You know, most time I don't care. I really love my life and I'm really happy right now where I am. But yeah, sometimes it's just like, you know, that little devil on your shoulder saying, shouldn't you be thinking about this? Shouldn't you be worrying about the future?
That definitely resonates with me, because when I read a book about people maybe who are in their 30s or 40s and talking about how they're living their life or the things they want, and I think, I've never thought that I wanted those things, or I've always considered those were options, but I've never had any true drive to get any of those things. Then I do wonder, is there something wrong with me? So, like, should I? And I know that should is one of those dangerous words.
Yeah.
I try to avoid it in my life, but definitely we don't exist in a vacuum. And so there are times when other people's expectations of what seems to be valued in society does trickle down into my consciousness.
Yeah, I think it's inevitable.
Yeah. What advice do you have for somebody who wants to make a change in their life but are struggling with it?
Most changes can be taken back. It doesn't mean you'll want to. Usually, when I think about a change, it's what's the best that could happen and what's the worst that could happen. And then I put them both there. And usually, the best that could happen wins over the worst that could happen, especially if you're planning stuff. Of course, I have no idea what choice we're talking about, so it could be a life or death thing, but in most cases it's not. Most cases, the best case scenario for a change wins over the worst case scenario, which would be probably failing. And there's nothing wrong with failing. There's a lot of good stuff coming from failure, always.
I like that, because if I lived my life only expecting successes, that would definitely hold me back from trying a lot of different things. And I definitely wouldn't grow very much.
Yeah, that's true. Even when traveling, I know that most travel stories, or at least the funnier ones, and the ones I remember the best, are the ones where when everything went wrong. Those are the ones that got stuck in my memory, because that's when you're out of your comfort zone. That's when stuff happens that you didn't plan for.
And it really does form you, doesn't it? When those things happen, it really builds interesting memories that make great stories, for sure.
Yeah, because you're never going to tell about the time when you went to a place and everything went exactly as planned. That's not
right.
fun.
Well, you might put pictures on Facebook, but then it wouldn't make much of a story for a dinner party.
Yeah. And for the future, I mean, in 50 years from now, those are not the stories you're going to tell. You're going to tell those times when you were completely out of depth. Well, you had no idea where to go next, where you got lost, or something happened that was really funny, that it wasn't funny at the time, but it was really funny afterwards.
Yeah, I think that's true, that when you have like strong emotions with an experience, that really does help form a memory that sustains, that will stay with you. As we end our chat, is there anything that I haven't asked you that you'd like to share?
Well, thank you so much for having me, which I haven't said at the beginning.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for agreeing and being so wonderful about joining me here for this chat. Where can people follow you? Do you blog about your travels at all?
I try. I'm not very good at that part of discipline with myself. I do have a site/blog. It's letmegetmybag.com, but I don't know, maybe I post once a year or once every 6 months. So I do want to keep a kind travel journey, at least for these 4 months, but no promises.
I'm going to subscribe, and we'll have some other listeners checking you out. So there's some incentive for you.
There you go.
Thank you so much for talking to me
You're
today.
most welcome, and congratulations on your podcast. As I said over and over, it's now my favorite podcast every week.
That's very kind of you. Thank you.
When I interviewed her, Laetitia was preparing to head off to India. I'm happy to share that she's made it to Goa. Laetitia, we're all waiting for a post with at least some pictures on your blog, letmegetmybag.com. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Changes Big and Small. For more great episodes like this one, don't forget to hit subscribe in your favorite podcast app. This will let you automatically download new episodes every week. As always, I leave you with this. Go ahead. Take the smallest step that you can today to get closer to your dreams. Have a great day, everybody.